Well, we all have stories of one sort or another from that terrible day on 9/11. CBS News producer Kia Baskerville, for example, was part of the traveling White House press corps that day, and she spent the hardest day of President Bush's presidency right by his side. Kaylee Hartung spoke with Kia about that experience.
Would I say it's a highlight of my career? Absolutely not. It's the most horrifying part of my career I've been through so far.
Kia was the television network's designated producer for President Bush's trip to Florida that day. The motorcade had just arrived at a local elementary school when news began to break.
I received a phone call from our local transmission pool producer who said to me, Kia, a plane has just hit one of the World Trade Center buildings. But I said, okay, well, I'll try to get whatever information I can from the administration. If I have to ask the president about it, I will. Normally, when you're traveling with the president, you're running. And you're running, they want to get the press in, they want to get the writers and reporters in to the actual speech site, so the president really doesn't have to wait. But that morning, interestingly enough, we stood outside of the school for about 20 minutes trying to figure out what's going on.
The press corps was eventually herded into the classroom, but Kia got another call before the president entered the room.
My phone rings, and it's actually my correspondent, Mark Knoller. He calls and he says, Kia, it appears as if a second plane has hit the other tower of the World Trade Center. It looks as if this is deliberate. You need to ask the president about this. And that's when I knew that there was something really wrong.
Moments later, the president walked in.
It was interesting. I mean, he just had no expression. He was expressionless. He went on as a leader should and greeted the children. And then it was a few minutes later when his chief of staff at the time, Andrew Card, interrupted him. And at that point, he was being informed about the second plane hitting the World Trade Tower.
The president ended his session with the kids and headed for the exit. The press corps was shuffled into another room, and the president gave his first address of the day.
And the next thing I know, we were hustled out, running faster than I think we've ever run before. I mean, a sprint to the motorcade, because he was not going to wait for the press. We all came to the realization that we had no idea what was going to happen next. And that's when we heard that a plane had just hit the Pentagon. And we all looked at each other and we said, you know what, the United States is under attack right now, and we happen to be with the leader of the free world. That started making me wonder, well, is it possible there's been a threat made against the president or Air Force One, which we're about to get on?
On board Air Force One, just feet away from the president, the press corps did what everyone else at home was doing. They watched TV.
The very first picture I saw was the World Trade Center smoking. And shortly after, I think as we started taxiing, roughly, the World Trade Center started collapsing.
Kia had no idea where they were going, but after 2 hours in the air, it was clear they were not going to Washington.
At that point, we literally demanded, we meaning the rest of the press corps there, we had to talk to someone. There's a guy named Gordon Jandro at the time who came back and said, listen, it's pretty obvious we're not going back to D.C. I am not going to tell you where we're going, but once we get there, don't turn your cell phones on. No one can know where we are.
Soon enough, they were on the ground in Louisiana at Barksdale Air Force Base. Here, the president delivered his second set of remarks for the day.
All the networks broke in, no matter what the programming was at the time.
With Air Force One at risk, the press corps traveling with the president was cut to the bare minimum. Kia and others were put on a separate government plane back to D.C.
And I remember looking out the left side of the plane as we were getting ready to land, and I just saw this smolder in the air. And I saw these, clouds rising, these plumes of smoke rising from what was the Pentagon.
She landed at Andrews Air Force Base and headed straight back to work at the White House.
I'm thinking I'm going to go home and be with my family and friends, but the day's not over.
The president would address the nation from the Oval Office at 9 p.m.
Minutes before he was about to go on live, he ran through his speech, and he made it very clear that he wanted no movement, no interruption, no talking, no nothing during his speech, which, obviously I can understand that. And I just looked up at him and said, Mr. President, you need to know that I'm going to be counting you down. So just keep an eye on me, and we'll get through this. And that's kind of how my day ended, was literally going, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. And at the end of his speech,
today, our
he sat there, again, with just would look like just emotionless, even though there was a lot of emotion going on the inside.
Deadly terrorist acts.
We just let him sit there. I think he sat there for a good 2 or 3 minutes, just at the desk when he finished, and no one moved. And he looks up at me, and I look, sort of down at him sitting at the desk, and I just kind of gave him a nod, as if to say it's going to be okay. And he says to me, "Nice job today."